Good day, familia. This is your host, Rafael Rey Collazo. You're watching and listening to the Collazo Show, the Collazo Show podcast. We premiere the show exclusively first, the video version of the show on Substack. Thank you so much for our Substack followers. And then we normally then show the show on YouTube. So you should also follow our YouTube channel, The Collazo Show. For some reason, early this week, I was having some technical issues. So the episode I recorded earlier this week is just on Substack. You're going to see some of the social media clips on social media. My thoughts sort of most immediate about the Louisiana versus Calais, the shameful Supreme Court decision, which infringes, which is a major, major blow. Basically puts us back over 60 years in Black and minority voting rights. And that's going to be a big chunk of the discussion we're going to have today. But kind of my more real-time reactions to some of the other issues of the day earlier in the week. So definitely check out, if you want to see the full episode earlier this week, check out our Substack page. And also check out, but of course, continue to follow us on Substack, YouTube on The Collazo Show, and The Collazo Show podcast. You're going to listen to a podcast. On this episode, it looks, later on the show, I'm going to talk about sort of the polarity of the Puerto Rican condition at this moment in modern times. And shout out a few people, speaking of that are definitely trying to make the world a better place within the Puerto Rican community and throughout our country. And then also some highlights of some of the other episodes I've done over the last last few weeks, which I think are indicative of kind of the mood of where we're at, and speak to some of the larger themes I wanted to speak on today. But I want to talk about today on this episode, the first thing I want to talk about, though, and again, thank you for joining the Collazo Show, commentary and analysis at the intersection of leadership, politics, y cultura. You know, there's a very emotional edition because the fallout and the real life implications of this shameful Supreme Court decision, Louisiana versus Calais, which basically makes Section 2 guts almost completely the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And has now opened the door, particularly in states where Republicans control the entire state political process in the legislature and governor, to basically strip Black political power away from Black voters. You're seeing Louisiana literally stopping elections so they can change the maps so that we can have at least one less congressional district that Black voters decide would have decision-making power from a voting perspective. We're seeing a shameful legislature and governor signing redistricting new law in Tennessee that eliminates the only Democratic and only majority Black congressional district representing Memphis. Alabama is trying to do the same if they already have it, eliminate at least one Black majority congressional district. Florida DeSantis has already signed into law another shameful map which dilutes Democratic voting power, minority voting power, and I'll talk about the impact on that in the Puerto Rican community in a moment. And, you know, we're just seeing this dismantling of our democracy in real time. And it's so upsetting because it's such a complete slap in the face and such a hypocritical moment for our country, because every time Black History Month comes around, particularly when MLK's birthday comes around, we celebrate that in January. There's this just kind of this theme throughout the year that years that across the political spectrum, we've kind of turned a corner in Black civil rights, and from and Obama's presidency was sort of another benchmark for people in a positive way that we've come a long time. But the fact that we have now in 2026 reverted back to 1963 really is such a betrayal of our democracy, such a betrayal to the vision and the dream that generations of civil rights activists had, not just for the Black community, but for everyone. You know, the Civil Rights Acts and the various civil rights pieces of legislation that passed in the 60s that opened up opportunities for Black voting rights, federal protections around housing discrimination, employment discrimination, educational attainment, that had huge positive implications for the Latino community. There's no bilingual education without the civil rights legislation in the 60s that opened the doors of opportunity. We have over close to 50 Hispanic members of Congress, over 40 of them Democrat, but about a half dozen Republican. If that doesn't happen, if we don't have opportunities in voting power, opportunities, relatively equitable voting rights power, if it wasn't for the civil rights work and the legislation that was passed during the civil rights era. And so it's just so incredibly frustrating to see that I have less rights today than I did when I was born. And my children will have less rights as and their partners will have less rights today, less federal civil rights protections than when I was born. And the fact that this, with these decisions related to immigration enforcement, that the Supreme Court even opened up a crack to the opportunity that, in this case, racial profile is okay if you have an accent or you look a certain way or you look a certain color or you're just a certain way in the wrong neighborhood. For me, we've gone backwards. And regardless of where you're at in the political spectrum, you have to acknowledge that, you have to understand it, you have to do everything you can to push back on that. Because even if you could say, well, I didn't vote for that, or I didn't want that to happen, I didn't think that was going to happen, we can disagree on, kind of where I think that means. But the reality is that's what's happened. Is that if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're a Democrat, if you're, or an independent, your voice in the political process is legally been diminished. And in the same way that African Americans have led this charge for our civil rights for all of us for so many years, to continue to do that, as you can see with some of the very compelling, much-watched footage, particularly in the state capital, Nashville, Tennessee. What's this young fella's name? I believe it's Representative Justin Jones, a true patriot, a true American hero. This young man, you see him, he's got that great look with the, Justin Jones, who's a Democratic state representative, young fella with his afro and his look, kind of harkens back to the 70s. With his appearance, but nevertheless, really being a face of the resistance to, Jim Crow 2026, fam. I don't know what you think it is. I don't know what you thought Jim Crow was and being in the Klan was. Of course, the most obvious thing is when they lynch us and burn us to death. By the way, their ICE agents do that to us. They're doing it slowly to us in ICE facilities. There's someone that dies in ICE incarceration once every 3 days. Why should hardly anybody die in ICE detention? You're only supposed to eat it a couple days for them to deport you. Should be very small windows for anyone. And how many cases have you seen? If you're paying any attention, and I need y'all to stop being willfully ignorant and acting like monkey see, monkey do. You don't see nothing. If you're paying any attention, you're seeing credible report after credible report of people in inhumane conditions. You wouldn't treat your animals like your pets like this. In these ICE detention facilities in Texas and Arizona, and maybe not too far from where you live. This is happening to people. People are complaining to their loved ones. They're not letting me have my medication. They're allowing me medication. They got me a salad. They're beating the shit out of me. They're killing me slowly. So don't be surprised when some people die, including women and children. Treating women, children, babies. Why should any baby, any child be incarcerated? Much less tortured. So this has been a real gut punch. And a turning back on the clock that, as an activist, I could not have anticipated us going this backwards in a relatively short period of time. And for anyone that thinks that racism is over and we got to move on, and, you're being really ignorant because you're obviously not paying any attention. Because of a quick Google search, there is nothing more racist than taking equitable voting rights away from, in this case, to the Black community. Probably the next, 4 to 6 years, you're going to see a third of the Black congressional delegation shrink because these seats will disappear and Black voting rights, particularly in the South, will be diluted. And para lo hispano, that think their shit don't stink. I'm going to talk about it in a second, pero para ver qué está pasando en Florida. Ron DeSantis did a big FU to the Puerto Rican community in Central Florida, hampering our political strength in Central Florida and voting in the state of Florida. And if a state like Texas or the states in the Southeast, if and when Latino voters get to a critical mass where they can start choosing who gets elected in the area, this decision is going to set us back. We want to have a Latino majority seat in Georgia, North Carolina, and the South for the rest of my life. And depending on how the politics shapes in other states in the West or the Northeast or the Midwest, that could happen too. Thank you so much for joining the Collazo Show. On that cheery note, I want to share with you some reflections I've had throughout the week from previous episodes. So some best of clips, and then we'll talk about all the fun stuff happening inside of this, how would you say, this polarity that the Puerto Rican community is experiencing at this time.
Oh, there's these rich people over at Churchill Downs, or wherever they do the Kentucky Derby tomorrow. And who do you think not only rides the horses? Who do you think freaking cleans them, trains them? You think it's a bunch of young middle class white guys cleaning all those 8 stables, picking up that crap? So keep it real. So there's a big you couldn't have without immigrants and with Latinos, you couldn't even have the freaking sport.
Good day, everyone. I'm just leaving a great event in New Brunswick, New Jersey, which we'll do some other content on. But I just wanted to, today really hurts, fam. We lost Puerto Rican basketball legend Jose Piculín Ortiz, the GOAT of Puerto Rican island-based basketball players. Of course, Carmelo Anthony, the greatest Puerto Rican basketball player of Puerto Rican descent. But in terms of island-based players, clearly to me the GOAT. Legend in European basketball. First round pick in the NBA, won the Pac-10 MVP, fan. He beat Reggie Miller in college for that honor. You're talking about a legend in Puerto Rican Basketball League, a legend in represented the Puerto Rican national team with honor, including beating the Dream Team with Allen Iverson in the 2004 Olympics. Carlos Arroyo gets all that shine, but without the big man and Jose Ortiz, that wouldn't have happened. None of that. Just real sad, fam. We lost. That was my commentary earlier this week. The first clip you heard, if you're just listening to this, was my commentary, the irony that in one of the most conservative pockets in the country, the South, in this case, Louisville, Kentucky, Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby, the splendor, kind of the pomp and circumstance of, you can't get any more Southern and genteel and swaggy than that moment, the weekend in Louisville, Kentucky, the Churchill Downs. The irony of it is that Chilo Hispano, without the immigrants, you could have none of it. From the jockeys, which had a real strong Latino Puerto Rican flavor, I'm going to talk about in a second. From everyone knows, if you know anything about Kentucky and horse training culture, Chilo Hispano, you couldn't deny that bullshit. So and it's funny how how on one hand we're told we don't contribute, and without us, these institutions, particularly these Southern institutions, like Churchill Downs or Mar-a-Lago or whatever you want to say, or the orchard groves of Central Florida, or the tobacco of the South, or the pig farming in North Carolina, none of that could happen without Latino immigrants. Thank you again for watching the Collazo Show. I want to talk about the polarity of the Puerto Rican condition that we have right now. And so I referenced it in the beginning. So on one hand, we have Ron DeSantis, the Florida Republicans, the Florida legislature shamefully passing another redistricting. Redistricting is not supposed to happen when you want it. It's supposed to happen every 10 years right after the census. So they're just breaking every norm, every institution. Our democracy is crumbling right in front of us. And, what has happened now, they've not only made several districts, congressional districts in Florida, more likely for a Republican to win, but the core congressional district that was the centerpiece of Puerto Rican political power that we have fought for 30 plus years. Congressional District 9, which until recently represented the bulk of the Puerto Rican Latino community in Orange County, the Orlando area, Kissimmee, Buenaventura, BVM, if you know what I'm saying? Kissimmee, Poinciana, the vibes. Osceola County, that whole area has been cracked, and now the Puerto Rican community vote has been diluted. So now Puerto Rican Congressman Darren Soto is still going to run, but instead of in a district where Kamala won and he won the majority, he's got to now run in a district with much less Latinos and Puerto Ricans, in a district that Trump won by with 58%. So not that he can't win, but it's going to be much more difficult. And why should the Puerto Rican community, which is the energy, the economic and social engine of the I-4 corridor, as much as anybody, why should we be denied political representation? So to all my people down there, and I want all the Puerto Ricans around the country may not be paid. Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Florida, the Supreme Court just did a big F you to us, fam. And I don't know what else to say about it. Y'all about power. Y'all about we should have this. We should have Puerto Rican voice. And we all waving flags. That's wonderful. Then you turn around and say, no, but I got to vote for this guy because of what? These people, what? No le gusta Harris. Oh, they're too pro-gay and they're too pro these other things. All right, well, even if we disagree on that, but coño, they just did smack us in the face big time with this political power move. So just understand that's what it is. And don't pretend that's not what it is. Support Darren Soto here in Central Florida. He's going to need help. The other part of it is, and this is a story, I encourage people to look it up on the island. And many of the reason this dynamic, the story that I just read about, is part of the reason so many Puerto Ricans moved to Central Florida. They're trying to get away from the nonsense on the island. So you got to look at this report, ProPublica, not your typical drug scheme, an incredible expose in ProPublica, where it was uncovered that federal prosecutors had built this entire case where gang members and people in prison were being paid with drugs to vote a certain way in political elections in Puerto Rico. So to vote for now Governor Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, who was running in a primary and unseated and defeated the governor a few years ago in the primary 2024, Pedro Pierluisi, and then won the general election in the fall, beating several candidates. So there was a whole drug scheme that involved drones dropping drugs off in the prison yard, and a whole understanding that, if you wanted to get these drugs in the prison, you had to prove to us that you supported Jennifer Gonzalez Colon in those gubernatorial elections. This is incredible stuff. The federal prosecutors were just about to not only prosecute many of these people involved, but with the political electoral trade-off, which is illegal. You can't pay people to vote a certain way. And then once Trump won in November, the DOJ killed the investigation. And, there's still some prosecutions going on about the drug dealing elements of it, the drug judge in the jail, but the political electoral elements out of it. There was nothing directly tied, at least, so far to the governor directly. But obviously, this raises a lot of questions. She's denying this, of course, doing it, and maybe she did directly. But the fact that we're dealing with this kind of corruption in Puerto Rico with our electoral system, our democracy, is very, very concerning. And the fact that this DOJ, who on one hand says there's all this voter fraud going on around the country that we have to deal with, the subliminal message to that is that Latinos aren't really Americans, because look at all these quote-unquote illegals voting when 80% of us are citizens. Over 30 million of us are eligible to vote. But, Hispanics in Colorado and Arizona, aren't real Americans, apparently. They put the kibosh, Trump's DOJ puts the kibosh on an investigation around voter fraud issues in Puerto Rico. So this is the kind of whiplash that we're dealing with. In Puerto Rico, our voting rights are being infringed upon. They're being infringed upon just by the structure of us being a colony. Then we try to get away from that, try to get some more economic and political power by moving to a community like Central Florida. And now our voting rights are being infringed by Governor Ron DeSantis and Republicans in Florida. Now, on the flip side, as you saw from my commentary, so it's the worst of times in some ways, and in other ways, it's the best of times. So thinking about this incredible victory of Jose Luis Ortiz, the horse jockey who won the Kentucky Derby, an incredible, thrilling cover behind him, a very exciting race. And it was even more special because his brother, Irat Ortiz, one of the best jockeys in the world, finished second. And just thinking about that visual and that moment of two brothers, family, their mother, the Ortiz family all being there to celebrate this incredible accomplishment by, talk about, some of the literally some of the smallest people we have in our community. You can't be a big guy, be a jockey. But those little guys got the biggest hearts and some of the greatest athletes in the world. And then the reason that we refer to, ironically, Jose Luis Ortiz is because the moniker in sports by the Puerto Rican community of Jose Ortiz has been taken by someone who I referenced a moment ago in my clip, who we just lost, the giant of Puerto Rican sports, the legendary hoops legend, Jose Ortiz. As we're recording this on Friday, there's going to be we're hours away from un homenaje tremendo that they're doing in El Coliseo in Puerto Rico for the legendary Jose Ortiz. Actually, probably taking place now. I think about it. We'll see the highlights and we'll share some on social media. You've seen the tributes. If you're into Puerto Rican social media, Jose Ortiz, and I shared on my clip earlier, was just a giant in every way, a wonderful man, and such a beloved figure. Puerto Rico is one of the people, it's very telling, that throughout Bad Bunny's residency on the island, and Puerto Ricans every weekend, we just watched it on Instagram, all these amazing shows and moments during these concerts on the island at Choliseo, of all the amazing celebrities and icons, ballers and performers that Bad Bunny highlighted and gave a platform to, un saludo, during his show. But one of the people that got the biggest applause was when Pico came out, to the point where it even kind of shadowed the other sports legend that was with him, Miguel Cotto, who's another incredible icon in Puerto Rico. So, the fact that we have, we're having these very challenging moments in literally like Puerto Rican civil rights on the island and in the mainland. We have these two examples of two Jose Ortizes, who on some level couldn't be any different, probably 2 feet in size difference. The smallest and the giant represent for Puerto Rico an honor and distinction throughout the world. And so I think that's very telling, very ironic, and very instructive to the power that we have. And I also want to shout out Nilda Ruiz, Jimmy Torres, and the crew at the National Puerto Rican Agenda. I haven't had a chance to discuss it on my show, but a few weeks ago, I had the honor of speaking and sharing my thoughts on the power of the Puerto Rican vote in the upcoming 2026 elections at the National Puerto Rican Agenda Summit, which took place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or as Puerto Ricans say back in the days, like Lancaster. And, if people don't know, that incredible long-standing tradition, Puerto Ricans have had a presence in Pennsylvania Dutch country for decades, and, which has a big connection to our agricultural and farm worker history. And Nilda and her team just Felix and the rest of the crew just at APM put an incredible event together, brought together a couple hundred of some of the most impactful Puerto Rican leaders we have in our country. I mean, it was just like a Puerto Rican Leadership Hall of Fame. Reverend Luis Cortez, Jez Nelson Diaz, Jose Lopez. I mean, just an incredible roster of advocates, the ladies from Acoplo, just an incredible roster of leaders and people with just incredible hearts that want to help our people and want to uplift our diaspora. Many of these people run nonprofits and are doing yeoman's work in Chicago and North Philly and the Bronx and New Haven, Connecticut, and Orlando, Florida, trying to provide services and support the development of our folks. But also, as busy as they are here, they still care a whole lot about the island and are doing philanthropy and thinking about ways to share their best practices on economic and community development, education, healthcare access, everything, all the above, civic engagement to our nuestras familias en Puerto Rico. So, un saludo, Nilda, the Puerto Rican National Agenda crew, and it's just another example of how we have the irony of this whole situation that we're going through in our country, this crisis, where we're losing really what we are fundamentally as a power, as a beacon of hope in this world, is that on the flip side, we have this incredible group of people in our country from diverse backgrounds who just want to do the right thing for everybody. And they want to bring their talents and skills, not just about making a quick buck and hustling you, but about servicing our community. And the Puerto Rican community brings that in multitudes. So thank you. Un saludo, the National Puerto Rican Agenda. I look forward to keep working with those good folks. And I want to shout out our family in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, and throughout New Jersey. We just had several events highlighting those leaders. Ray Santiago, a wonderful young up-and-coming Puerto Rican leader, runs the Hispanic Center in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, another traditional Puerto Rican community, historical Puerto Rican Latino community. Kim Ruiz, otro Boricua, talk about a powerhouse who just led she runs an organization out of Perth Amboy, New Jersey, and she just organized for us a statewide convening of Latino leaders talking about our collective economic and social agenda in New Brunswick. You'll be hearing more about that. You're going to see more visibility in our state capitals. We're going to be doing some follow-up activities in Trenton, Harrisburg, and Denver, Colorado. And I just got the phone with our leaders in Phoenix, Arizona. So there's a great movement of people. And you know what? The big takeaway that I get from folks in this hour of dire issues that we're facing as a country right now. I talk to Latino leaders day and night, coast to coast. And you know, as literally under attack that we are, there isn't a sense of revenge or retribution or malice. There's a sense of just, yes, there's fear, there's exhaustion, there's concern, there's frustration. But even at this time, our people still want to be unified with everybody. They want to help everybody. And, you know, we're just as concerned about that poor white person that voted for Trump who's got a kid with disabilities, now doesn't have a rural hospital for their kid to get their services, as we are for our Nieto, who has similar issues in the inner city, Jacksonville, Florida, or Tucson, Arizona. And I hear that sense of inclusion, of forgiveness, I hear that for everywhere. And, you know, from a human perspective, our community and a lot of Americans need a lot of credit for still remaining human, still wanting to be there for everybody. And, you know, yeah, we're frustrated. We want some people out of our lives, out of our politics, no question about it. But no estamos aquí para malicia, para dañar la vida a alguna persona inocente, or we don't want to hurt anybody. We just want equitable representation and a fair opportunity at the American dream. That's all we want. That's it. That's it. Thank you so much for watching the Collazo Show. Please don't forget that someone is dying in ICE detention every 3 days. That's not a statistical anomaly, coincidence. There's some real issues in these facilities. Keep following people like Nick Valencia News. I uploaded some clips he's doing and some partners he's working with that we want to work with to highlight those issues more here on the Collazo Show. You're going to see the next episode of the Meet the Candidate series. I got a Latina running for Congress in the South that you may not expect would be representing in that community, but she's got a great chance of winning and is a rising star in Democratic politics. And I just want to thank you all so much for watching the Collazo Show. Continue to subscribe to the Collazo Show on Substack, YouTube at the Collazo Show, and anywhere you download a podcast. Have a wonderful Mother's Day to my wife, my mom, de casa de paz, my mother-in-law, all the wonderful mothers in our lives. And I hope you have a peaceful Mother's Day weekend with the mothers in your life and your loved ones. And we'll keep talking on Monday. Have a great day.